My own protégé, the kid I pulled from the dish pit and taught everything I knew, stole my restaurant, my recipes and my name, then tried to sell it all back to me as a franchise opportunity. My name is Arthur Ainsworth. I'm 62 years old, and for 30 of those years, I was what you'd call a chef's chef. I didn't chase celebrity. I didn't do talk shows or slap my face on a line of frozen dinners. I chased perfection on a plate. My life wasn't built on a stage. It was forged in the searing 120-degree heat of a professional kitchen, a brutal symphony of clanging steel, roaring flames, and the hushed, intense focus of a team in the heat of service. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. My restaurant, Ainsworth's Table, was my masterpiece. My life's work. We started in a forgotten corner of Chicago's West Loop, long before it was trendy. It was a rundown tavern my father used to drink in, a place that smelled of stale beer and regret. I bought it with his small life insurance policy and every single cent I'd ever scraped together working 16-hour days in other people's kitchens. I didn't hire a contractor, I was the contractor. I laid the reclaimed bricks for the wood-fired oven myself, my knuckles raw and bleeding. I sanded the ancient mahogany bar back to life by hand. For the first 2 years, I was the chef, the janitor, the bookkeeper, and the guy who fixed the perpetually leaking toilet in the men's room. It was a brutal, soul-crushing, thankless existence. I remember sleeping on a pile of flour sacks in the pantry some nights because I was too exhausted to make it home. But slowly, painstakingly, people started to notice. They didn't come for the decor, which was modest at best. They came for the food. They came because they heard whispers about a chef who was doing something different, something honest. They came for my signature dry-aged duck, a 30-day process of meticulous temperature and humidity control that I'd perfected over a decade of obsessive trial and error. They came for my sourdough bread, made from a starter I'd been given as a young man in Naples. The old baker, a man named Enzo who had hands like gnarled olive branches, made me work in his bakery for an entire summer, for free, just to prove I was worthy. On my last day, he gave me a small jar of the bubbling, living culture. He called it il cuore, the heart. I called it the mother. It was a direct descendant of a starter from his great-grandfather, a living culture over 150 years old. It was my most sacred possession. By our 10th year, Ainsworth's Table had 2 Michelin stars. We weren't just a restaurant, we were a destination. A pilgrimage site for people who understood that food could be more than just sustenance, it could be art. I was content. I had my sanctuary, my craft. I thought that would be enough. That's when I met Leo Vance. He was 19, a bright-eyed kid washing dishes in the back, with a fire in his eyes that I recognized because it was the same fire I had at his age. He was smart, impossibly ambitious, and soaked up knowledge like a dry sponge in a rainstorm. He didn't just wash dishes, he watched. He learned the rhythm of the kitchen, the names of the purveyors, the timing of every station. I saw his potential. I took him under my wing. I taught him how to butcher a whole hog, how to feel the exact moment a sauce is about to break, how to listen for the hollow thump of a perfectly baked loaf of bread. He moved from the dish pit to prep cook, from the prep line to the sauté station, and eventually to my sous chef. He was a phenomenal cook, a quick study with a natural palate. But Leo possessed a talent I never had and frankly, never wanted. He could work a room. He had $1 million smile, a politician's memory for names, and a way of telling the story behind a dish that made diners feel like they were being let in on a beautiful secret. I despised the front of the house, the endless glad-handing, the schmoozing, the fragile egos of VIPs. I just wanted to be in the kitchen, with the food. So I made him my partner. I thought it was a perfect symbiosis. I gave him 20% of the company and made him the general manager. I was the heart of the kitchen. He became the face of the restaurant. I created, he presented. For a golden decade, it was a symphony. We were on top of the world. Then, the whispers started, so quiet at first I barely noticed them. Leo wanted to expand. Arthur, we're not just a restaurant anymore, he'd say over a late-night glass of bourbon. We're a brand. That word, brand always felt like a cheap suit on a fine gentleman. He started using other words I hated: scalability, monetization, leveraging our assets. He hired a PR firm run by a woman in sharp heels who spoke entirely in buzzwords. Suddenly, our Instagram page, which I never looked at, was filled with professionally lit, impossibly perfect pictures of him. Leo with a visiting celebrity. Leo on a charity gala red carpet. Leo holding one of my dishes, smiling that blinding smile as if he just pulled it from the ether by sheer force of will. I'm a private man. I let it slide. The focus was always the craft. But the signs were there, like the subtle, unmistakable notes of cork in a fine wine. He started taking investor meetings I wasn't invited to. Just exploratory, Arthur. Prospecting. Don't worry your head about it. He brought in financial consultants who created elaborate presentations I didn't understand. Then came the brand Bible. He presented it to me one afternoon, a thick, spiral-bound book with a slick, minimalist cover. Inside, every single one of my recipes, my life's work, had been codified, standardized, and broken down into hyper-specific, idiot-proof steps. My duck recipe, which I taught by feel and instinct, was now a 12-page flowchart with decimal points. He called it the Ainsworth method. This is our intellectual property, Arthur, he said, beaming. This is how we protect the legacy. It's how we can replicate the magic anywhere in the world. He didn't understand that the magic wasn't in the steps, it was in the soul of the person executing them. The most critical step came a year before the end. He sat me down in my office, his expression a careful performance of earnest concern. He had a stack of legal documents with him. Arthur, he said, I've been talking to the lawyers. We're vulnerable. All of our contracts, our supplier agreements, our liquor licenses, they all require your signature. What happens if you're traveling? Or God forbid, something happens to you? The business could grind to a halt. We need to streamline. He proposed a limited power of attorney for business operations. It would allow him to handle the day-to-day contracts and licensing without bothering me during service. It's just to take the boring stuff off your plate, so you can focus on creating, he said, looking me right in the eye. I trusted him. He was like a son to me. I signed the papers. The final gut punch came in the form of a glossy magazine. Food and Wine. They were doing a feature on the restaurant's 20th anniversary. Or so I thought. Leo handled the entire thing, the interviews, the photo shoots. The day it came out, he placed a copy on the pass in the kitchen, right next to a sizzling pan, his smile wider than the Mississippi. I wiped my hands on my apron and picked it up. The cover read, Leo Vance, the new face of American cuisine. The cover photo was him, standing alone in my kitchen, arms crossed, looking visionary. Inside, it was a 10-page hagiography about him. His vision. His genius for curating the dining experience. My name was mentioned once, in passing, as his reclusive early mentor. I looked at the photos of him posing with my dishes, my creations, my soul on a plate, and I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. This wasn't a partnership anymore. This was an erasure. If you enjoy stories about a master reclaiming his kingdom from a serpent he nurtured himself, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. We drop unreleased stories every single day, and each one hits harder than the last. That night, after the last customer had left and the kitchen was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerators, I called him into my office. The magazine lay between us on my worn wooden desk. What is this, Leo? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. He didn't even flinch. He leaned back in his chair, the picture of cool confidence. It's PR, Arthur. It's the story. An old-school chef passes the torch to his brilliant protégé. People eat that stuff up. It's good for the brand. I never passed you a torch, I said. I handed you a ladle and told you to stir the damn sauce. This is my name on the building. My recipes. My life. About that, he said, and his tone shifted. It lost its practiced warmth, replaced by a chilling corporate efficiency that I now realized he'd been perfecting for years. The investors and I feel the brand has outgrown the Ainsworth name. It sounds dated. Stuffy. We need something with energy. Something that can be franchised. The word hit me like a physical blow. Franchised? You cannot franchise what I do. You can't replicate the mother in a factory in New Jersey. You can't mass-produce a 30-day aging process. It's an abomination. He sighed, a theatrical display of patience for the naive artist. Arthur, you're still thinking like a cook. I'm thinking like a CEO. We're launching Vance, a lifestyle culinary brand. We've already secured the leases for 3 new locations: New York, Miami, and LA. Your recipes, the Ainsworth method, have been codified. Standardized for easy replication by any line cook with a high school diploma. You can't codify my life's work, I said, my hands clenched into white-knuckled fists under the desk. And what investors? This is my company. I own 80% of it. And then he delivered the killing blow. He smiled, a thin, cruel line. He slid a thick folder across the desk. Not anymore. Remember that power of attorney? It gave me the authority to act on behalf of the company. I used it to restructure our parent company. We brought on a new investment group, Sterling Cole Capital. They bought out a majority stake to fund the expansion. The paperwork was finalized last week. You've been retained as a culinary consultant, with a 5% non-voting equity stake. It's a generous package, really. You get to keep a piece of the legacy without any of the stress. My blood ran cold. I opened the folder. It was all there. Legal documents, transfers of ownership, signatures, my signature, which he had the legal authority to place, all transferring control to a new LLC called Vance Hospitality Group. He had systematically, legally, stolen my soul. He'd even trademarked the names of my signature dishes. My dishes. You're out, Leo, I said, the words tasting like ash. Get out of my restaurant. He actually laughed. A short, sharp, dismissive sound. Arthur, you don't get it. You can't fire me. You're sitting in my office. In my building. I own the name on the sign. I own the recipes in that kitchen. You work for me now. Or you can retire. Your choice. I didn't say another word. I stood up, walked out of the office I had built, through the dining room I had designed, and past the kitchen where I had spent 30 years of my life. Before I walked out the front door for the last time, I made one small detour. I went to the small temperature-controlled proofing room where the mother lived in its crock. I scooped a small portion of the precious starter into a humble Tupperware container I grabbed from the pantry, wrapped it in a kitchen towel, and tucked it inside my coat. He could have the recipes, the building, the name. He would not have its heart. He called after me, something about a transition plan and severance documents, but I didn't hear him. The roaring in my ears was too loud. I went home to the small house I kept on the city's outskirts. I sat in my quiet, personal kitchen and I didn't get angry. I didn't despair. I'm a chef. When you're faced with a chaotic, disastrous service, you don't panic. You get organized. You focus. You execute. You begin your mise en place. My revenge would be a dish served ice cold, over a long and painful period of time. I had work to do. My mise en place had 3 key ingredients. First, my lawyer, Eleanor Shaw. A shark in a bespoke suit who specialized in intellectual property and founder disputes. I laid out the whole ugly story. The power of attorney was a devastating mistake, Arthur, she said, her expression grim. The corporate restructuring is, on its face, legal. But he got arrogant. His entire valuation is based on the premise that he is selling the authentic Ainsworth's table experience. If we can prove, conclusively, that the product he's selling is a fraudulent, inferior imitation, we can sue him for consumer fraud and fraudulent use of your name and likeness. We don't attack the structure, we attack the product. Second, my old sous chef, Maria Flores. A brilliant, passionate young chef I'd trained myself. She had confronted Leo the day after I left, called him a snake to his face, and quit on the spot. She was working at a small, unassuming bistro in a quiet neighborhood, cooking her heart out for a handful of regulars. I went to see her. Maria, I said, how would you like to remind this city what real food tastes like? A fire lit in her eyes. Third, and most importantly, was Julian Dubois. Julian isn't a food blogger or an Instagram influencer. He's the anonymous, terrifyingly influential critic for the Global Culinary Review. The Kingmaker. His review could build an empire or bury it. We'd known each other for 20 years, a relationship built on a mutual, almost religious respect for the craft. No one knew what he looked like, but I had his private number, reserved for emergencies. This, I decided, was an emergency. I spent the next 3 months in the shadows. I watched as Leo remodeled my restaurant, stripping away its warmth and character, replacing my reclaimed wood and warm lighting with chrome, glass, and jarring neon blue accents. He was all over the news, a media darling announcing the grand reopening of Vance Chicago, the flagship of his new empire. The hype was deafening. He was promising the same Michelin star food, but now accessible and modern. The reservations were booked solid for 6 months. He was standing on the highest, thinnest branch, and I was quietly sharpening my saw. Our counter-offensive was quiet, almost invisible. At Maria's little bistro, which we renamed the Humble Plate, we started a secret menu. We didn't advertise. I just made a few quiet calls to some old, trusted food journalists and a handful of our most loyal former customers. Maria's doing a little tribute to some old classics, I'd say. You should stop by. We served my 30-day dry-aged duck. We served bread baked from the mother. The word began to spread through the underground foodie community like a secret password. Have you tried the bread at the Humble Plate? It tastes like the old Ainsworths. We were creating a control group for our experiment. 2 weeks before Leo's grand reopening, I called Julien Dubois. Julien, I said, I need you to review 2 restaurants for me. No one can know we've spoken. The first is the grand reopening of my old place next Friday. Be ruthless, but be honest. The second is a little bistro called the Humble Plate. Go on Saturday. Order the duck and the bread. There was a long pause. Arthur, he said, his voice heavy with understanding, consider it done. The night of Leo's grand opening was a media circus. Klieg lights, red carpets, celebrities, influencers taking selfies with their meticulously plated, soulless food. I watched the local news reports from my home. Leo was radiant, soaking in the spotlight. We've kept the soul of the food, he told a reporter with a straight face, but we've elevated the experience into the 21st century. I knew what was happening inside that kitchen. I knew his new chefs, hired for their resumes, not their passion, were trying to follow my brand Bible like a paint-by-numbers kit. They were using a commercial sourdough starter he'd had chemically analyzed to approximate the mother. It was a forgery. Their ducks were aged for 10 days in a high-tech chamber, not 30 days by patient craft, a corner cut to increase volume. They were making food that looked like mine, but it lacked a soul. The real bomb dropped 3 days later. Julien Dubois's review was published online. It was a masterpiece of controlled, eloquent demolition. He didn't just attack, he dissected. He wrote of Vance Chicago, *, it is a restaurant suffering from a profound identity crisis. It wears the clothes of a fine dining legend but possesses the hollow heart of a chain restaurant in a high-end airport terminal. The famous sourdough, once a benchmark of artisanal baking, has been replaced by a handsome but vapid loaf, a triumph of food science with all the character of a suburbanite's garage. The signature duck, a dish that once sang with the complex, funky notes of patient aging, now whispers a faint, sad memory of its former glory. Mr. Vance has successfully replicated the menu, but he has failed to replicate the magic. It is a flawless imitation of a masterpiece, which is to say, it is entirely worthless. Then, in the final paragraphs, he delivered the kill shot. He wrote of the Humble Plate, if you wish to know where the soul of Ainsworth's table has gone, you will not find it at its old address. You will find it here, in a small, unpretentious room miles away. Here, a young chef named Maria Flores is not imitating the past. She is honoring it by keeping it alive. The bread, good heavens, the bread, is a living thing, tangy and complex and utterly perfect. The duck is a symphony of flavor that brought tears to my eyes. This is not a tribute, it is a continuation. It is proof that a legacy is not a brand to be sold, but a craft to be passed down. One restaurant is a memory. The other is a resurrection. The review went viral. It was quoted everywhere. The narrative was too perfect to resist. Ghost Kitchen, one headline screamed. The soulless successor, read another. The very next morning, Eleanor filed our lawsuit. It wasn't just a legal document, it was a press release. It laid out the entire story of the betrayal and, crucially, attached sworn affidavits from 3 of our oldest, most respected purveyors, testifying that Vance Hospitality Group was now purchasing inferior, cheaper ingredients. It even included a chemical analysis from a food lab comparing a loaf from Vance to a loaf from the Humble Plate, showing the vastly different microbial cultures. We weren't just saying Leo's food was bad, we were proving it was a fraud. Leo's investors, Sterling Cole Capital, who had bought into the hype of a turnkey Michelin star brand, panicked. Their 9-figure investment was predicated on authenticity, and Julien Dubois had just declared it a forgery in the most public way imaginable. His reservations, booked for months, began to cancel in droves. The media, which had built him up, now delighted in tearing him down. His empire crumbled before the first franchise location had even broken ground. The emergency meeting with the investors was in a cold, glass-walled boardroom downtown. Leo was there, his face pale and drawn. He tried to bluster, to talk about subjective opinions and a coordinated smear campaign. Then Eleanor played her final card. She calmly informed them that I, Arthur Ainsworth, was the sole owner of the original Mother Starter. "What Mr. Vance has is a cheap imitation," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "What we have is the 150-year-old heart of the product. Without it, you cannot legally or ethically claim to be selling the product your brand is based on. You don't own a restaurant, you own a name, and as of this morning, that name is synonymous with fraud." That was it. The investors cut him loose. They initiated legal action against him for fraudulent misrepresentation to recoup their losses. Vance Hospitality Group filed for bankruptcy within 6 months. He was wiped out, buried under a mountain of debt and lawsuits. Last I heard, Leo Vance was managing a high-end steakhouse chain in Scottsdale, Arizona. He sells overpriced wine to tourists and tells a carefully edited story about his time in the Chicago food scene. He is a ghost in his own life, a man who had everything and threw it away because he valued the picture of the meal more than the meal itself. I never got my old restaurant back, but I never wanted it. The name was tainted. I invested in Maria. We found a larger space and opened Journeyman's Table. It's our place. It's built on a partnership of trust and mutual respect. We have no PR team. Our Instagram is just blurry pictures Maria takes on her phone when she's proud of a dish. We don't chase stars, we chase perfection. And every morning I go into the kitchen and I feed the mother. I care for it, and in return, it gives us bread that tells a story. A story of heritage, of patience, and of the simple, undeniable truth that the things of real value in this world can never be stolen, franchised, or faked. My revenge wasn't a single moment of victory. It's the quiet satisfaction I feel every night when we serve a perfect loaf of bread, knowing it was made with integrity, patience, and a piece of history that can never be bought. If you enjoyed this story, like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.